She looked me in the eye, dead calm, and said, "You're unfulfilling in every way." She thought I'd break. Instead, I smiled and told her about Lena. There never was a Lena. But by the time she found that out, it was already too late. She said it without emotion, like she was reading a nutrition label. "You're unfulfilling in every way." No anger, no pity, just flat observation. Caleb didn't flinch. He sat still at the dinner table, the fork in his hand hovering midair before he slowly lowered it back to the plate. The chicken was overcooked. Fitting. "Is that right?" he asked, his voice neutral. Harper tilted her head slightly. There was almost a smile at the corners of her mouth, like she was proud of her diagnosis. Just being honest. Caleb gave her exactly what she didn't expect. Eye contact. Direct, steady, unreadable. "Well," he said. "Lena doesn't seem to agree." That did it. Just for a second, something behind Harper's eyes flickered. She didn't speak, didn't move, but she'd heard him. She'd felt it. Harper had always believed herself emotionally superior, untouchable. She liked to prod and analyze, dig beneath the surface. Caleb had always let her, silently absorbing the damage. But not this time. "Lena?" she asked, her voice strained. Caleb shrugged. "Woman at the gym. She laughs at my jokes. Finds me more than fulfilling." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was surgical, cold and deliberate. Harper reached for her iced tea and took a long sip, her eyes never leaving his. Caleb didn't smile, didn't blink. He knew he'd just shifted the entire balance between them. He wasn't lying. Not really. There was no Lena. But there didn't need to be. The idea was enough. Caleb used to believe that being a good man meant being adaptable, forgiving, predictable. He provided. He compromised. He gave space. He thought silence preserved peace. He thought low conflict meant love. But now, sitting across from a woman who had just emotionally gutted him like it was a casual observation, he felt something new rising in him. Precision. He wasn't angry. He was done waiting to be rescued. His name was Caleb, 38, senior systems analyst. He liked order. His days used to follow neat timelines: coffee at 7:05, inbox 0 by lunch, dinner by 6. Married life had been a routine, and he had believed that routine meant security. Harper, his wife, taught Pilates part-time. She color-coded their pantry and arranged flowers like it was a competitive sport. Their neighborhood in Richmond was the kind where people waved but never talked too long. From the outside, they looked like a couple that had it figured out. But inside, things had been corroding. Slowly, quietly, started small. Harper would sigh mid-conversation like every word out of his mouth was a chore. She began rolling her eyes during date nights. Her phone buzzed more often, always face down. She left the room during dinner to check something, and returned with a vague smile and colder eyes. Caleb noticed, but he didn't ask. He didn't accuse. He rationalized. Stress. Boredom. Life. Then came the statement. "You're unfulfilling." And suddenly everything crystallized. This wasn't drifting apart. This wasn't miscommunication. This was intentional. Calculated. A verbal cut designed to bleed slowly. A test disguised as honesty. But Caleb didn't react the way Harper expected. He didn't defend himself. He didn't beg. He gave her what she wanted, what she thought she wanted. He mentioned Lena. That one name rewired the whole dynamic. Harper couldn't process it, not right away. She thought she was steering the ship, pushing boundaries Caleb would never cross. She didn't realize he'd stopped playing her game. He had a different one now. 7 days passed. They moved around each other like colleagues after a failed project. Conversations were minimal. Tension lived in the walls. Harper watched him closely, trying to classify him, as if she didn't recognize this version of her husband. He was quieter than usual, but not passive. Present, but unreadable. He looked calm, almost free. Then she cracked. It was a Tuesday evening. She curled up on the couch, barefoot, holding a glass of wine like it was a prop. Caleb sat across the room, scrolling through his phone, disengaged. "I've been thinking," she said gently, voice rehearsed. He looked up. Yeah. She shifted, tucking her legs beneath her. Another performance. I think maybe I need to explore what freedom really feels like. Caleb almost laughed. Not at her. At the language. At the way she tried to dress up selfishness in enlightenment. Freedom? He repeated. She nodded, slowly. From the idea that marriage has to be a cage. I'm not blaming you. Your thing with Lena made me realize we've both evolved. He stared at her, unreadable. So you're saying you want an open marriage? Harper sipped her wine. I want to live more honestly. If you want to keep seeing Lena, I won't stop you. That was the moment Caleb knew. She believed it. She believed Lena was real. She thought she'd stumbled into a win-win. Cheat without guilt. No fallout. No shame. Caleb gave her a nod. Okay. She hesitated. That wasn't the reaction she expected. She was waiting for anger, heartbreak, a plea for exclusivity. She got silence. Okay, she repeated, unsure. If that's what you need, Caleb said. Go explore. And with that, he picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The game had started. But not the one Harper thought they were playing. Harper thought she'd won something. A new rulebook. A modern upgrade. She began leaving the house at strange times. Networking brunches. Late yoga. A new Pilates client. She came back with that smug look. Like she just pulled one over on the universe. Caleb let her have it. He played the part she needed. Distracted husband. Calm. Detached. Supportive even. He nodded when she gave vague answers. He smiled when she said she might be late. He handed her a travel mug and told her to enjoy her brunch. But behind the scenes, he was rebuilding. Quietly, strategically. He started with her phone. Caleb never touched it. He didn't need to. She had a habit. Every evening before her shower, she plugged it into the charger in the kitchen. Screen up. Predictable. Within a week, he had patterns. He didn't snoop, he observed. Message previews, timestamps, names. He took photos, not for confrontation, but for documentation. He stored them in a private folder on a cloud drive labeled Work Backup. He wasn't being paranoid. He was being precise. Then he moved to her calendar. She'd synced it across devices years ago, never thinking he paid attention. But he did now. Every new meeting got logged. Every class she added pinged his phone. Caleb built a spreadsheet. Dates, claimed activities, observed behaviors, tone, risk level. It wasn't about catching her in a lie. It was about understanding the full scope of the person she was becoming. He wasn't looking for evidence to weaponize. He was trying to see her clearly for the first time. Harper, meanwhile, carried on like she had discovered a higher plane of existence. She acted lighter, like she'd shed some invisible burden. But there was tension underneath. She started asking indirect questions. How was your day? Productive, he would say. No elaboration. She'd wait, hoping he'd ask about hers. He never did. The silence unnerved her. Harper didn't handle ambiguity well. She thrived on control. Caleb was no longer giving her any. He watched her carefully, not with suspicion, but with clarity. She wasn't falling in love with someone else. She was falling in love with the idea of being untethered. It wasn't about desire. It was about novelty. She wanted to rewrite the rules without asking if the game was worth saving. Caleb didn't chase. He didn't fight. He sharpened. He spent a few weekends away, no announcement, no explanation. He packed a small bag, said nothing, and returned 2 days later smelling like campfire smoke and wind. Harper asked where he'd been. Clearing my head. You don't even like the outdoors. Maybe I do now. She started sleeping closer to his side of the bed again. She played music he liked, cooked meals he hadn't tasted in months. One night, she wore the old shirt he once said made him smile. He didn't react. Not because he didn't notice, but because he finally saw the truth. She wasn't trying to reconcile. She was trying to reset the narrative. Control the optics. Harper didn't apologize. She performed. Her voice softened. Her smile returned in fragments. But it was all surface. No substance. Caleb gave her what she feared most. an emotional void she couldn't manipulate. Then came the moment he'd been planning. It was a Wednesday afternoon. He came home early. Harper wasn't expecting him. When she opened the door, she froze. Isla was walking down the hall in Harper's white robe. It was deliberate, timed, precise. Harper's face snapped into something between shock and fury. What is this? Why is she wearing my robe? Caleb didn't flinch. He poured tea, handed one cup to Isla, and said calmly, "She's my girlfriend." The word hit like a detonation. Harper laughed. Short, brittle. "You're joking. You're actually trying to mess with me." "Nope." Isla smiled politely. "Hi, you must be Harper." Harper's hands shook. "I'm calling the police." "For what?" Caleb asked. "You brought some random woman into our home." Caleb tilted his head. "Our home? You said you wanted freedom. This is what it looks like." 20 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. Harper ranted about violation, emotional abuse, and disrespect. Caleb stayed calm, showed them his lease. Isla wasn't on it, but he was. "She's here by invitation," he said. The officers nodded, warned them to work things out civilly, and left. Harper stood frozen in the hallway, like the house no longer belonged to her. She didn't speak much after that. The next morning, she hovered by the kitchen. She tried to act casual. Caleb handed her the butter and didn't look up. Later that day, she found him alone and said, "I can't sleep." He didn't answer. She said, "I miss how it used to be." He didn't answer. Then she asked, "Did you ever actually sleep with her?" "No," he said. "There was never anyone." She staggered slightly, her mouth parting in disbelief. "The robe, the police, what was all that?" "A favor, just to make you feel it." "Feel what?" "What it's like to wonder, to doubt, to wake up unsure of what's real." Harper's voice cracked. "So this was all a setup?" "No, it was a mirror." Harper sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor like it might offer a different outcome. The truth still echoed in her head. There was no Lena, no Isla, just illusions carefully placed. Not to hurt her, but to reveal the hurt she'd handed out like it didn't count. "You wanted to test love?" Caleb said, standing across the room, arms still. "You wanted to see if it would hold under pressure. You didn't care if it cracked. You just needed to feel something." She didn't deny it. He continued, "But love isn't a stress test. It's not a game. And when you treat it like one, don't be surprised when the person on the other side walks away." Tears formed, but Harper didn't hide them. She didn't try to spin anything. For the first time, her voice wasn't layered in justification. It was low, almost childlike. "I thought you didn't care. I thought we were done. And I thought, if I pushed hard enough, maybe something would wake up again." "You didn't want connection," Caleb replied. "You wanted chaos. You wanted to feel the rush of danger without the cost." "I didn't love him," she whispered. "It wasn't even about him." "I know." Her eyes widened. "Then why did you go this far?" "Because I needed you to see it. Not just hear it, but feel it. The doubt, the silence, the wondering if you were enough." Harper sat there, breathing shallowly, finally understanding what he'd done. He hadn't screamed, hadn't left, hadn't retaliated. He'd built a psychological mirror and handed it to her without saying a word. "You really wanted me to suffer?" "I wanted you to understand," he said. "And now you do." She stood up abruptly, pacing the room. "So that's it? You got what you wanted? I get it now. Okay? I was wrong. I screwed everything up." Caleb didn't react. She spun toward him. "So we're just done?" "No," he said calmly. "We're finished. There's a difference." The next morning, she tried to reverse course. She made his coffee. She turned on the music he liked. She asked if he wanted to go for a walk, something they hadn't done in months. He answered politely, but there was no warmth, just civility. By Thursday, she found the envelope. She was coming downstairs when she saw it. Manila, flat, no label. She picked it up slowly and pulled out the single sheet inside. At the top, divorce agreement. She stood there frozen, reading the words twice. Then she looked up at him, standing in the kitchen like he had no stake in it. "Is this really happening?" she asked, voice low. "It already happened," he replied. "This is just the paperwork. Please, Caleb, just talk to me." "I've been talking," he said, "for years. With my silence. With my patience. With every excuse I made for you." She clutched the paper like it might dissolve. "I can fix this. I'll stop everything. I already have. I blocked his number. I haven't seen him in weeks." "You still don't get it," Caleb said. "It was never about him." "Then what was it about?" "It was about trust," he said. "And when that broke, love didn't stand a chance." She stepped closer, desperate now. "You said there was no one else. That you didn't cheat. Doesn't that mean something?" "It means I didn't stoop to your level," he said. "It means I still respected myself, even when you didn't." She collapsed onto the couch. "I never thought you'd actually leave." "I know," Caleb said. "That's why I have to." By the time the sun went down, she had barely moved. Caleb went about his day as if it were any other. Dinner, dishes, a book before bed. She watched him with wide eyes, trying to find cracks in his calm. There were none. The next morning, she asked the final question. "Did you plan all of this from the moment I said you were unfulfilling?" "No," he said. "But that's when I stopped protecting your feelings more than my own." She exhaled, eyes red. "And Isla, friend, owed me a favor." "So?" "The robe, the tea, the whole scene with the police. All calculated," he said. She covered her mouth. "You wanted to humiliate me." "No," he said. "I wanted you to experience consequences." "Same thing." "No," he corrected. "Humiliation fades, but consequences stay." She stared at the divorce agreement again. "Where will I go?" "That's not my decision anymore." Caleb left the room, leaving her alone with a piece of paper that weighed more than any lie she'd ever told. The days after Caleb handed her the divorce agreement moved slowly, deliberately. Harper didn't slam doors anymore. She didn't throw out sarcastic comments or make passive-aggressive remarks. She moved through the house like a guest, cautious and quiet, her presence reduced to light footsteps and barely audible sighs. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words carried weight. Not in volume, but in hesitation. Every interaction between them was practical. The plumber rescheduled. "There's a package at the door." "I moved the laundry." Not once did she ask if he was staying. Not once did he offer a reason to. She started spending time in the backyard. Alone. Sitting, not doing anything. Just watching the grass grow. As if something out there might explain what had gone wrong, or more accurately, what had been ignored for too long. One evening, Caleb returned from a walk to find her sitting on the back steps. She didn't turn around when he approached, didn't acknowledge him, but when he passed her to drop something in the trash bin, she finally spoke. "He wasn't even special." He paused. She didn't look at him, just kept her eyes on the yard. "The guy I ran to, he didn't make me feel seen, or loved. Not even attractive, really." Caleb didn't reply. "I thought stepping outside the lines would spark something in me, like I'd rediscover part of myself. Instead, I just broke things." He stayed still, listening, not to comfort her, but to let her sit with what she was finally willing to admit. "I didn't enjoy it," she added. "I told myself I would, that it would be empowering. But mostly I just felt hollow." She turned to look at him now. "Then why do it?" Caleb asked. Harper opened her mouth, then paused. "Because I wanted to see if love could survive being tested. If it still meant anything when it was bruised and ignored." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "And," she swallowed hard, "I don't think it can." They stood there in silence, a long one. Not uncomfortable, but final. The next evening, Harper approached him again, her voice softer. "I've stopped texting him. I haven't replied to anything. I blocked his number." Caleb nodded once. "Okay. That's it? She asked. You don't care. I care, he said. Just not in the way you want me to. What way is that? You want me to forgive you so you don't have to carry the guilt. You want to believe this can still go back to what it was. But it can't. She stepped closer, frustrated now. So it's just over? After everything we've built? He looked her straight in the eyes. You didn't care about what we built when you risked it. Now you care because you see it slipping. That's not love. That's loss management. Tears welled up, but she didn't look away. I was confused. No, he said. You were selfish. She took a shaky breath. You could have just told me you were unhappy. I wasn't, he said. I was loyal. I was present. I was boring to you. That's what this was about. You weren't boring. You said I was unfulfilling in every way. He reminded her, his tone still calm. And you said it like it was fact. I didn't mean it. But you did, he interrupted. And I believed you. That's what hurt most. She took another step forward, reaching for him. We can rebuild this. No, Caleb said. We can't. Because I'm not rebuilding with someone who only sees value in what they almost lost. She blinked, clearly not expecting the line. It hit her harder than shouting ever could. The next morning, she hovered again, this time in the kitchen. She didn't ask him to talk. She didn't bring up the papers. But he could tell she was on the verge of something. Finally, she asked, Do you still love me? Caleb thought for a moment, then answered honestly, I love who I thought you were. That was the last time she brought it up. That evening, Caleb returned from the store to find Harper sitting with a packed bag beside her. She didn't say where she was going. He didn't ask. She stood, gave one last glance around the house and opened the door. I don't think I'll ever stop regretting this, she said. He nodded once. That's not my responsibility. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. No slamming, no drama, just silence. Caleb sat down on the couch, stared at the empty room for a long time, then exhaled deeply. Not with anger, not with relief, just finality. Caleb didn't celebrate. He didn't post anything, call anyone, or open a bottle. There was no sense of victory, just clarity. The silence in the house was no longer charged or hostile. It was calm. After weeks of pretending, he could finally exist without performing. The divorce went through quickly. Harper didn't contest anything. She didn't ask for mediation. She signed every page without negotiation. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to salvage. Or maybe she realized trying to argue her way out of accountability would only cheapen what little dignity she had left. She moved out a week later. Caleb stayed in the house not because he was attached to it, but because it felt like a clean slate. Not a museum of memories, but a reminder of who he'd become. In the weeks that followed, he returned to the life he used to live. Coffee in the morning, quiet evenings, reading without interruption. But something had shifted. He no longer equated routine with safety. He no longer saw silence as surrender. He had learned that peace, real peace, required boundaries, not just patience. One day, Jordan, his longtime friend, dropped by unannounced. They hadn't spoken much since the dust settled. She really left? Jordan asked, settling into the same chair he always had. Caleb nodded. About a month ago. Was it hard to watch her go? No, Caleb said. It was hard watching who she became. Jordan studied him. So you don't miss her? I miss who she used to be, Caleb said. But that version of her stopped showing up a long time ago. There was a pause. Then Jordan asked the question that had likely been on his mind for weeks. Do you regret any of it? The mirror. The whole game you played? Caleb considered this. No, because it wasn't a game. It was the only way to make her see what she'd done. I didn't yell. I didn't cheat. I didn't destroy anything. I reflected. Jordan nodded slowly. So what now? I rebuild, Caleb said. For real this time. On my own terms. And he did. He picked up new habits. Not to distract himself, but to reconnect with parts of him he'd ignored during the marriage. He started hiking on weekends, not because he loved the outdoors, but because the solitude gave him space to think without background noise. He joined a local book club, something Harper used to dismiss as unproductive. He didn't go to meet someone. He went because engaging with people who valued growth felt good. The house no longer felt like a shared project, felt like his. He rearranged the living room, donated anything that carried the weight of her choices. Bit by bit, he created a space that reflected who he was, not who he had to be to keep peace. Then, one Saturday morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. It was from Harper. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't beg to come back. Instead, she wrote 5 paragraphs about what she'd learned. About how her actions weren't just mistakes, they were decisions layered in entitlement. She admitted she'd treated their marriage like a test he didn't agree to take. She apologized not for getting caught, but for assuming she had the right to experiment with someone else's heart. At the end, she wrote, "I thought you were the safe one, the one who'd always stay. I confused your quiet with weakness. Now I understand that silence is often the loudest answer." Caleb folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. He didn't feel bitterness. He didn't feel vindicated, just confirmed. A few months later, he ran into her by chance. Grocery store early evening. She looked different, smaller somehow. Not physically, just quieter in her presence. She smiled. "Hey, hey." They exchanged a few neutral words. Nothing tense. Nothing meaningful. Just 2 people who used to know each other too well. Before leaving, she said softly, "You look steady." "I am," Caleb replied. As she turned to walk away, she paused and looked back. "You ever think about what we had?" "All the time," he said. "That's how I know I'm not going back." She nodded slowly, accepting that answer in full. Then she walked away. Caleb watched her leave, not with longing, but with understanding. Some people aren't meant to be villains. They're just people who never learn how to value something until it's gone. That night, he sat by the window with a book in his lap and a cup of tea. Not whiskey, not coffee, just something warm, quiet. He didn't feel empty. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt right. He had proven something to himself, not about strength, not about revenge, but about self-respect. That you can walk away without shouting. That you can reclaim your voice without breaking someone else's. That dignity isn't found in reaction. It's in restraint. Caleb didn't need to win. He just needed to heal. And he had.